Fantastic. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Eric Lofholm, and we have a special treat today. And I'm joined today by Ben Gay III. And Ben is likely the last protege of Napoleon Hill's. And Ben is the author of the Closers. He's the man behind the Closers book series, and he's been helping people increase their sales all over the world for many years. And he's been a mentor of mine. Now, Ben, we go back 1998, I think, is when you and I first met. And
Sounds about right.
yep, yep. And so, Ben, why don't we start off and share with everybody your background of how you happen to personally know Napoleon Hill?
Well, I joined a company called Holiday Magic Cosmetics, which then was the largest MLM network market direct sales company in the world. And I won a year-long sales contest. I wish Zig could be here today so I could remind him that I beat him. And I won the mystery prize, and I didn't know what it was. Frankly, had forgotten there was a contest almost. It was a year long. I knew we were making money doing well. But it turned out Jimmy Rucker and I, my running buddy, business partner, and longtime friend, had won. So since I was sort of the front man for the organization, they asked me to come to California and discover what the mystery prize was. And what it was presidency of the company. This is a company that rather quickly was doing, adjusted for inflation to today, 3.5 billion with a B, $3.5 billion a year, and I was a high school graduate. So I was in over my head. And I faked it because I was a good speaker and a good writer and so on. But I often wonder, they talk about imposter syndrome. I kept waiting for the door to my office to fly open and have the board of directors or somebody come in here and say, "We just checked, you're not qualified." So, unbeknownst to me, and I got to know everybody that was anybody. We were the largest seminar promoters in the country also. So if you wanted to be on our stages, you had to come see me. And that's how I met dozens of famous people. And I can loosely say they worked for me, whether if only for a day or 10 days or whatever, and many of them full time. So one day, Napoleon Hill, unbeknownst to me, was in the office building to present William Penpatrick, the owner of the company, with a plaque naming him one of the 5 greatest Americans or something like that ever in the country, and present him with a book that said that in the book. And again, I didn't know he was in the building. It was a private little ceremony in the back. And on the way out, apparently, I heard this from both Bill Patrick and Dr. Hill. On the way back to the front to escort him back to his car to go to the airport, Bill said something to the effect of, "I've got a young man running this business and he's doing a great job, but I'm not sure he wants to take that long walk down the hallway from his office to my office to admit that he's scared or in over his head or doesn't know what he's doing or has a question," and so on. How would you feel about being his, and I don't know what term he used, we didn't toss mentor around this or coach like we do now, but how about you be his friend? I was 25 at the time. Dr. Hill was 84. He was old enough biologically to be my great grandfather.
Wow.
And he said, and you just work with him and so on. And whatever he tells you is in confidence. And we'll both pledge that to him. And Dr. Hill accepted. They also worked out the dollar amount, $50,000 a year, which in 1967 was pretty substantial, about a half a million today. And so there was a knock on my door, and there was Bill. And so I stood up with a little old man. I always like to say I'm about the age of the little old man now. And but he had a cane. And so I got up and went around to introduce myself. I still didn't know who he was. I'd never seen a current picture of him. I'd seen those old pictures with a high neck collar taken in the 20s and 30s. So I said, "Hi, I'm Ben Gay." And Bill Patrick jumped in. He said, "Ben," like I was a Martian. He said, "This is Dr. Napoleon Hill." And I said, "Oh, Dr. Hill, how are you?" And he said, "Call me Nappy." Well, that began our first fight because I never called him Nappy. I didn't say the word Nappy till after he died. I'm a Southerner. If you're a doctor and you're old enough to be my great grandfather, you don't go by nicknames. You go by sir or doctor or whatever. So, on that happy note, they then explained the deal to me, and we went to work together. And he was available to me 24 hours a day. I never tested that, but by phone. He lived in Columbia, South Carolina at the time. And I was working my tail off at all hours, so I probably called him at some inconvenient times. And he would come out, probably 4 times a year and spend a week. He'd stay up at the house with us. And in my office, my desk was a long conference table, sat about 12 people around it. At far left was Dr. Hill's chair, whether he was in town or not. And it had to be standing room only and him not there before anybody sat in that chair. And the same for the room up at our home in Marin County. There was Dr. Hill's suite, and nobody went in there unless the house was full and he was confirmed to be on the East Coast. So he became a very important figure in my life and came along at just the right time. At the end of the first year, by the way, Dr. Hill began hinting that he'd like to, are we going to continue the relationship? And I certainly wanted to. So I went to Bill Patrick and I said, "Bill, Dr. Hill's hinting that he'd like to work another year. Is that okay?" He said, "It's okay with me because it's on you. I paid the first year. You paid the second year." Suddenly I had a $50,000 decision of my own to make, and I paid it. And I think I paid the third year. I couldn't swear to that, but I've often wondered about it because he died 2.5 years after our relationship started. I think the Napoleon Hill estate owes me for half a year.
Okay. All right. I want to share with everybody how you and I met. And I was at a prepaid legal meeting as a speaker many years ago. They changed their name to Legal Shield, and I was chatting with this woman after the meeting, and she had asked me if I had read The Closers. And at that time, I wasn't familiar with the book, and I let her know that, and she says, "Well, this is the best book ever written on sales." And so I wrote it down and I put that note in my coat pocket. Back then, I used to wear a sport coat. Now it's much more casual in business, but I used to always wear a tie and a sport coat. And so a couple of months passed and I reached into my coat pocket and I pulled out the message about The Closers. And so I'm not really sure how I got your number, if she gave it to me, but anyway, I called the number and to order the book. And Ben answered, and I didn't know that it was Ben that, because he didn't say who it was, and he just answered the phone, and I said, "I'm calling about the closers," and he went into his presentation about the closers part one, and I think part two, and there was an audio cassette package, and there was an offer, and he got to the end, and he asked me if I wanted to buy the package. It was around, I think, $200, and I said yes. And as he was explaining about the package, he said, and the reason why I've included the newsletter and the reason why I've included this, and I was like, "Is this Ben himself?" And it of course was. And so that is how Ben and I met. And Ben lives not too far from where my mom used to live. My mom lived in Cool at the time, and Ben was in Placerville. And so I asked Ben if he would be willing to have a meal with me. And this is back before I was quote unquote Eric Lofholm. I didn't have my own training company. I was a sales rep for Tony Robbins, and Ben agreed to have this meal with me. And I was really just honored that he would, because Ben's one of the treasures in the sales training field. having decades of experience helping people all over the world increase their sales. And so, Ben, why don't you tell a little bit about the closers and how that all came about?
Well, I started the 800 call center industry, the National Communication Center in 1976, and discovered after the fact that something like 86, 90% of all Americans didn't know an 800 number was free to them to call. So I had to start an industry, start a company, and educate a nation. And very few ads had an 800 number in them. So I was a little desperate to get business going. So I assigned a publication to everybody in the office, and their job was to go through it, find something that could benefit from an 800 number, uh, tear it out, send it to word processing. We had 6 letters set up, a series. If you bought on the first letter, you didn't get the second one, so on, about why you ought to have an 800 number in your ad. And so I assigned myself the Wall Street Journal since I was reading it every day anyway. And one day, going through the want ads, I saw a thing and it said something about closing. It was a horribly written ad, didn't state really what it was. The only reason I was interested in it was it didn't have an 800 number. So I took my little penknife, cut it out, clipped it to the typing request to send downstairs. And then I thought, closing, and they wanted $14.95. That was clear. But for what, I wasn't sure. So I attached my personal check, $14.95, sent it down. If they had never sent anything, I never would have thought about it again. It was one of many ads I clipped out that day. About 3 weeks later, a package arrived that if I got it today, I'd call the bomb squad. It looked like it was wrapped by gorillas in brown paper. The address was written in crayon or marker's pencil or something. I thought, God, what is this? And I open it up, and there is the original. It just said the closers back then. We're now up to the closers part 8 is at the printers. But it did say the closers. And I did what you do when you get books. I flipped through the pages. They shot all over my office. It was so poorly bound and printed. The few pages that were still in it, about half of them were bound in upside down. So I thought, well, I've been cheated out of more than this in the past. So I went to throw it in the trash can, and right next to the trash can was my open briefcase, and I was about to go to New York. So I thought, well, I'll throw it in the briefcase. I even had a plan for getting rid of it. Thumb through it, see if there's anything of value in it. And then I'll leave it in the back seat pocket of the seat in front of me and let the airplane crew worry about it. So that was my plan. I started thumbing through it on the plane and reading and reassembling pages and so on, and discovered I had found the Dead Sea Scrolls of selling. The gentleman couldn't write, couldn't spell, didn't know grammar, but buried within it, well, it was like had a friend, he's passed away now, the wisest man I've ever met personally. He had a third-grade education and owned a pig farm next to some property we had here in Placerville. So it's one of those nuggets where the guy is obviously an idiot, but he also knows selling. So when I got off the plane at LaGuardia, I went over to the payphone. For your younger people, that was the phone on the wall, not in your pocket. You put a dime or a quarter in it to call somebody. And I called the number in the book, which, by the way, is where you got my number. It was in the book you bought or in the stuff you got. So called the number and I said, hi. Somebody answered and I said, hi. I just finished reading the closers and I want to talk to somebody. And this guy said, Mr. Gay, how are you? Well, this is before Candid Camera, or about the time of Candid Camera, before caller ID, before any of that stuff. And I said, I didn't give you my name. He said, well, we printed 500 copies of the closers. We ran one ad in the Wall Street Journal one day. We sold one book. So if you've read the closers, your name is Ben Gay, and you live in Placerville, California. And I said, that bad, huh? He said, it's not going well. I said, it's great stuff. It just needs work. Pardon me. I thought I had turned everything off. And it just needs work. So long story short, I bought his entire, I said, how many you got? I'll buy the rest of them because I already told friends about it. He said, let us see them. And he said, well, like I told you, we printed 500. We sold one, so I don't have to go count them. We have 499. You want them? I said, sure, I'll take them. So I took the books, got the rights to rewrite it, edit it, and on the front of the book, by the way, people say I wrote the closers. It says editor. You can read that. It's the only book in the series I didn't have an actual hand in, although rewriting it was a bit of a chore. So we rewrote it, put it on the market, showed it to our distributors, and we were already selling cosmetics and a lot of other things. And they and my advertising sold 10.5 million copies of that book when we quit counting 30 years ago. I really don't know how many we've sold up to now, but I think it's
Wow.
safe to say it's the best-selling sales training book ever written. And the rest of the Closers series is just, in fact, the Closers Part 2 is a better book, but I haven't been able to convince the world of that, so it sells well, but the Closers Part 1 still outsells them all.
Fantastic. And for those of you on the call, we're going to go just a little bit longer today than what we normally do. If any of you do need to get off at the normal time, that's no problem. And Ben, why don't we talk about share, what was one insight that you learned? You had the opportunity to personally work with Napoleon Hill. You're likely the only person still around that he worked with. And what was one insight that you gleaned from him from the work you had with him one on one?
Well, as you can imagine, many, when he was in town, he was in my office 8 hours, 10 hours a day, just sitting there writing. He probably wrote some other famous book while he was there. And up at the house, a lot of casual conversations, and you learn things. He started me on a system one Saturday morning when he came out. I thought he was still asleep in his bathrobe with a coffee cup and joined me on the deck overlooking San Francisco Bay, not exactly the way I wanted to be caught by Dr. Hill because I was trimming my toenails. And I said, Dr. Hill, how are you? And he said, I'm fine. What are you doing? I said, I'm trimming my toenails. Were starting to snag on my socks. So I knew it was time to trim them. He said, trim them. I said, how often do you trim them? I said, well, whenever they're catching on my socks. He said, no, go get your calendar. He had already gotten me on a calendar system. So I got my calendar. He said, and we guessed how long it had been since the last trimming. I don't remember, it's whatever. But over the years, I figured it out. It's 6 weeks. At 6 weeks, my toenails need trimming. So every 6 Saturdays in the calendar sitting right here, it says trim toenails, move up 6 weeks. And that's from Dr. Hill. But what I'm really telling you is he put me on what he and I call, we developed it together, a daily success system where it's not dependent, I'm not dependent on feeling motivated to do things. It's on the calendar. It'll be done before the day's over, unless something extraordinary happens, in which case it might be moved up to some other date because I'm waiting for something. But he put me on I'll give you a great example. He said to me one day, um, how do you do in your family life? I was given 300 speeches a year, flying all over the country. And I said, well, family life's pretty good. I sort of wedge it into the nooks and crannies. And he said, we found the problem. And I said, I didn't know there was a problem. He said, there is. And he said, get your calendar. So I got the calendar and he said, if you need to get your wife on the phone, do that. But what I want you to do is now mark off 4 long, he knew I like to take long weekends. I've never taken a 2-week vacation in my life, but I like, travel Wednesday, be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, travel back Monday. He said, let's pick out 4. And we picked out 4. He said, write them in the calendar. So I did. It was to go over to Mendocino on the Northern California coast, one of my favorite places in the world. Occasionally we insert something else, but it's usually Mendocino. And he said, now those are sacrosanct dates. Nothing interferes with them. And I said, okay. He said, see, now we're beginning to structure your life. You know when you're going to go on vacation. You know when you're not going to work. You know when to trim your toenails. We're starting to make progress. And and then before that meeting was over, he said to me, how often do you go out for dinner with your wife? I said, well, we eat out frequently, entertaining people. And so he said, no, how often do you and your wife go out to dinner? Nobody else, uninterrupted. And I said, well, whenever. He said, whenever is not an answer. Get out your calendar. And I think we started on Friday nights because that seemed logical. It's bounced around over the years. But to this day, one day a week and four long weekends a year, uh, nothing interferes with those. So I began through the daily success system blocking out my life. Podcasts I do, this is an exception because it's you. Podcasts I generally do on Wednesday. I like to just jam them up on Wednesdays and have the rest of the week to work like a normal human. And every aspect of my life, the calendar never leaves my office because if I lost it somewhere or it got stolen somewhere, I'm not sure I'd want to face life the next day. Everything I'm supposed to do for the next year, and on the last page, things I need to move up to the new calendar when it arrives. So I've got the next year or two, and in some cases, life laid out on this calendar. So people say, Gigi said to me this morning, what are you going to do this morning? And I knew it was you because it was an odd time. So I said, I'm talking to Eric. But normally my response to that is, I don't know. I haven't seen my calendar this morning. Or you go look at the calendar, you know where it is, because I don't have to. People say, it's Friday night, I'm going to plan next week. I've already planned next year. And so I don't have to wonder what I'm going to do Monday. I open up the calendar to Monday and it tells me what I'm going to do. And if it's time sensitive, it's highlighted in yellow, 7:45 this morning for you, highlighted in yellow. And might have an asterisk next to it if it's something terribly important or it needs to be done. Earl Nightingale, one of my good friends and mentors, used to teach a thing from Ivy Lee, plan your day ahead. That's fine. I'd improve that. And then number the list the 5 most important things you have to do tomorrow and number them in their order of importance. I don't do that. I list everything I'm going to do tomorrow. If it's not important, it doesn't go on the calendar. I've learned to say no to things. You'll love this, Eric. You know those people who want just a quick chat with you?
Yeah.
Just need a quick chat, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I said, fine. Send it for free. Send me the details via email, bfg3 dot, so and so. My quick chat fee is $300, and we'll bill that to your PayPal or to your credit card. Do you prefer free or $300? I've had a few who take the $300. Most take the email, and a lot of them just go away. But that's how I got into coaching, by the way, spending a lot of time on the phone helping people and so on. And Gigi said, why don't you charge for that? And I said, well, I like doing it. She said, I'm sure you like doing it, but why don't you charge for it? I said, you mean like set a fee? This is years ago, but yeah, like set a fee. So I set an initial retainer coaching fee, announced it, including to the free caller, people who used to call him for free. And I said, here's the new deal, $29.50, $2,950, gets you 10 hours. You can use it any way you want it, a minute here, 10 minutes there, whatever, but you've got 10 hours, 600 minutes of time. I have one guy who's still on his first 600 minutes 5 or 6 years after he started, because I get the quick questions. Ben, da 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 da, yes or no? Yes. Thank you. Bang. And I probably haven't remembered to write down most of those. Other people eat up their 10 hours in a month, any way they want to do it. But here's the good news. What the advice I started giving when they were paying for it started being acted on a whole lot more than before.
Hmm.
And about half of them, when they found out they had to pay, went away. And so I was a winner in two directions. My coaching quality improved and my time loosened up by about half. So that's how I got into coaching. Gigi whining about me not making enough money while talking to people for hours every day.
Ben, we've got just a couple minutes left. Share an insight on the importance of either scripting or preparing your presentation in advance. A lot of people on the call here are delivering presentations, some of them wing it. Can you just spend a couple minutes speaking about that?
Sure. Scripting has a bad name. People, I won't work on scripts. I can always tell a script when it's being done. Really? Have you been to the movies? Uh, do you know they're on script? Have you watched the news? While chatting, they're reading a roll that's coming in front of the camera lens. Everything that we see outside input is scripted. So if you've been in selling over 30 days, you're on a script. You tend to say the same things in the same situations. So we're not talking about are scripts a good idea or a bad idea? They are. What we're talking about is, do you have a quality tested script that works? And I'll make it even simpler for you. When I joined Holiday Magic, they got up in front. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ben Gay. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic. Years later, it still comes to me. And he went on for 37 minutes, introduced the film. At the end of the film, Jeff Hunter, the old movie star, turned to the person who brought you here, ask how you can get started in Holiday Magic. Lights came up. The person who brought you there or sponsored you got out his yellow legal pad and started drawing circles using 6 scripts. Uh, if you bought on the first one, fine. If you didn't, you got the second close, third close, fourth close. So learning from that, I extracted, and I get a little less criticism and rejection of scripting, is script chunks. In other words, you don't have to go, good evening, my name is Ben Gay, and talk for 37 minutes and hope they don't interrupt because you lose your place in the script. But when someone says to you, what about the closers, for instance, what I would say to you in explaining the closers, part one, is word for word the way I've explained it thousands of other times and have sold millions of books. When you ask about the closers, part two, I go to a script chunk just about that. When you ask about coaching, I go to a script chunk. It might be a sentence, it might be 5 sentences. And most of those script chunks wind up with, uh, thank you. Based on what you've told me, here's what I suggest we do. Fill in the blank. Fair enough. That's my powerful close, by the way. Fair enough. And most people say it's hard to say no to say fair enough. And if they do say no, what they do is they tell you what's really bothering them. And it's always something. If they say it's not the money, for instance, then you know it's the money. Uh, if they have to check with their brother-in-law in Cleveland, who's an attorney, to run it by him, you know that A, they're a liar. They don't have a brother-in-law. He doesn't live in Cleveland. He's not an attorney. They're stalling. That's Latin for I want to think it over, or I don't want to make a decision right now. Well, if you've been in selling again for 30 days, you've heard every objection on earth that there is to hear. I swear to God, I haven't had a new objection. There could be some fill in the blanks, personal things that are different, but I haven't had a new objection in 30 or 40 years. And it may be longer than that. Well, if you know all the objections and all the stalls, why wouldn't you have a script chunk ready to take care of that? And more importantly, in my scripting, I knock out just about every objection there is up front. In other words, J. Douglas Edwards taught me years ago, and I wrote it in the book I did for him. It's called Sales Closing Power, and it's at our website. If you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. If you're selling Rolls Royces, the built-in objection is they cost a lot of money. So as I used to tell the folks at British Motors when I was training them there, greet them, hand them your card, and say, before we get started, one of the great things about working here, and I'm going to use the pricing then, it's probably more now. One of the great things about working here is I get to meet people every day who can invest $350,000 in a car. That's just astounding. So I hope we become friends and I get to know you because I'd love to know how you did it and so on. When you say $350,000 in a car or 450, whatever it is now, you look at their eyes, and if they dilate or if they spit up blood, you have a price objection. If they're cool with it, you've knocked out the biggest objection there is to a Rolls Royce right up front. Pricing isn't an issue, then here we go. So, and that's true of so many products. We all have a built-in something.
Ben, I want to thank you for saying yes and coming on and sharing some of these incredible stories. And I appreciate you being a mentor in my life and taking an interest in me before I ever became a trainer. I was a sales rep for Tony Robbins, and you're willing to have a meal with me. And I appreciate your friendship and thank you so much for showing up today.
Thank you, sir. My honor.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up our session today. Thank you for showing up. And I like to end our call by saying goodbye to everybody. Armand, thank you for being here. Benjamin, thanks for showing up today. Bob, great to have you. Kathy, thanks for joining today. Dave, thank you for joining. Derek, great to have you in class. Diane, thanks for joining. Diana, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for the emojis. Doug, thanks for joining. Kathleen, thank you for showing up today. Dr. Phil, great to have you. Ed, thank you for joining. Fabian, thanks for being here. Frank, great to have you. George, thanks for joining. Greg, great to have you. Helene, thank you for being here. Jock, thanks for joining today. Yvonne, thank you for being here. Jeffrey, thank you for joining today. Jenna, great to have you. Jerry, thank you for being here. Joyla, great to see you. Karen, thanks for joining. Keith, great to have you. Kelly, great to have you. Kevin, thanks for joining. Kim, great to have you. Kimberly, thanks for being here. Lynn, thanks for joining. Marie, you have greatness inside of you. Max, you're an elite prospector. Okan, thank you for being here. Michael, thanks for joining. Marit, great to have you. And Nat, thanks for joining. Oriol, thanks for being here. Pete, thank you for joining. Enrique, thanks for being here. Russ, great to see you. Sever, thanks for joining. Silva, great to have you. Stacia, thank you for joining. Thomas, you're an elite coach. Urban, we're going to work on closing deals next. Vicky, you're a master of action. Wayne, thanks for joining. Yvette, great to have you. And Zandra, thanks for being here. Look forward to connecting with you guys tomorrow. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.